We all make plans. We all plan for our future. Seems like the older you get, the more you probably think about what's your future going to look like, maybe even retirement. What if all that's taken away from you? And better yet, how do you respond to somebody else that maybe has happened to? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode of On Beat. On this episode of On Beat, I want to talk about refugees. I have known people who work with refugees, especially with the Syria conflict and all that happened over there. I know people who are on the front lines still trying to minister to refugees. And I also know people who are truly affected by what's going on in Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine on a couple different mission trips. And also, I am very good friends with a couple of Ukrainians who I love, Vasil and Maria, who are two of my favorite people. Vasil is like a son in the Lord to me. I had the opportunity to baptize him back in 2007. But so when the Russian conflict happened and the war broke out, it affected so many people. It still is affecting so many people over there. And it especially affected Maria's mom and dad. You know, everything they'd worked for, they had a place where they had their own farm, where they had everything that they had worked for. They were completely self-sufficient. They didn't shop at the market. They didn't do these things. They grew all their own things. They had their own animals, all of those things. They even had a place that they had bought for retirement and all those kinds of things. And all of that's been taken away from them, every bit of it. They lost everything. And they're now here living in New York, which has to be bizarre. You know, you think about, you're somebody who's lived in a village, a farmer. This has been your way of life, pretty much all your life. And all of a sudden you're in New York with nothing, but you're there with your family. And we think sometimes, I've heard so many people over the years when it comes to refugees and those kinds of things, it's amazing to me some of the mean things that people say about refugees. It's amazing to me, especially some of these have even been from Christians, which is even more amazing. In fact, it's almost on par with some of the things that God said to his people in, books like Exodus, where, God has taken his people from a land of bondage. They were slaves to the Egyptians. They were oppressed. They were just living miserable lives. And God took them out of there into a land that they could have never done for themselves. Gave them the victory over their enemies, established them there in the land, blessed them entirely. And one of the things that God always warned them about was how they were to treat foreigners, refugees. Let's face it, we have a lot of refugees in this country. People who've come from war-torn countries. People who were oppressed by these regimes, who come in and oppress everybody, trying to force their ideologies on people or trying to force their way of life on people. And these people have had to leave and flee and leave everything they've ever known. And now here they are. And they're looking for people to try to help them. And we can get caught up in the politics of things. And that's just a huge distraction. We should never make it about politics. We should make it about, what if it was me and my family? How would I want people to treat me? And that's some of the stuff that God says to his people. I want to read just a few verses that I believe are important to this. In fact, I'm doing this video today because I was asked to do this video. And I wanted to share these words. And I want them to be encouraging because I think we don't need to pay attention to things that are a distraction. We need to remember that all human beings are made in the image of God. We're all image bearers, all of us. Men, women, boys and girls, image bearers of God. We're the only creation that's created in his image. the only creation. That doesn't mean that God has like this body like ours, not that kind of image. But we are spiritual creatures. We have the ability to rationalize. We have the ability to create. We are co-creators with God. We are the only creatures that can rationalize, that can envision, and then execute that vision and make those things come into reality. That's what God did when He created everything. It was already envisioned. It was already preordained. And then it was all created, and we do the same thing. Every building you look at was a thought in someone's mind. Every piece of technology was a thought in someone's mind. Starbucks was a thought in someone's mind, and they made it come to be. And that's how we're creating the image of God. And all human beings have value. All human beings matter. All human beings, their lives matter. And we should never forget that. And we want to get sometimes caught up in complaining and bickering and why are these people here and our tax dollars are going towards this. I can understand that to an extent, but at the same time, they're human beings. Imagine if you lost everything. Imagine if you were completely dependent upon other people to help take care of you and your family. And God's Word has some things to say about this. God, especially speaking to His people, said things like this from Exodus 22, verse 21. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. They of all people should know what this is like, and God warns them to not do that. Again, Exodus 23:9. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. And then the last verse I want us to think about is what Jesus said in Matthew 25:35. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. We've kind of lost that neighborly aspect of community in our country. We've become so individualistic and so isolated in our own little homes, behind our garage doors and shut doors. And, you know, Americans used to be a little bit more caring towards people and wanting to try to help people, try to help lift people up, help lift people out of the background of oppression, whatever it was that they came from. And I'm not saying that that doesn't exist anymore, because it does. But it seems like it used to be a lot more so. Like people used to be a lot more neighborly. You know, I can remember being a kid, my mom would say, go next door and ask so-and-so's mom and she'll give you a cup of sugar and I'll pay her back later or something. I mean, I remember doing things like that. It's kind of weird to think about something like that today. And I'm not saying that, you know, I probably would never do something like that, but it just seems like, you know, we all used to have this mentality like we're all in this together. You know, we want everybody to be blessed and everybody to have access to the same opportunities. And we tolerated each other's differing viewpoints and differing opinions. And now just look at how bad it is right now. It's just so bad. But you know, you and me can be the change that we hope to see. It can start with us. And I think that we, especially as Christians, I'm speaking specifically to Christians. You know I have a past. I have a past. I have a lot of shame, regret, things in my past. And God's forgiven me of my past. God has cleansed me of my past. God's given me a future and a hope in Him. God does not hold my past against me. God does not hold my sins against me. God encourages me to turn away from those things that are hurting me, to choose the way that He has for me, a way that leads to salvation, a way that leads to life and to life abundantly. And you see, as Christians, we should want to help people overcome their circumstances. Again, refugees can't help what happened in their homeland. They're not the politicians. They're not the decision makers. Most people who are affected by war are not the people who are at the top making the decisions. It's usually the people who are way on the bottom of the totem pole, who are just trying to live life and take care of their families, tend to be the ones who suffer the most from politicians' poor decision making. We shouldn't hold these things against people. And I know that we can't help everybody. But if we have people around us who need that kind of help, as a Christian, I'm speaking specifically to Christians, we should want to help. One of the greatest blessings of my life has been helping someone like Vasil, and who in return, I helped Maria, his wife, but mainly because I helped Vasil. Vasil, when he was in Ukraine, came here as a foreign exchange student, was a student in my student ministry. I was a youth pastor then. Came into my student ministry, and he was here studying abroad. He worked really hard and was able to come here as a foreign exchange student through a program that our nation created to help children of former Soviet Union countries to come here and learn about democracy so they would take it back and bring democracy to these countries. And while he was here, I got to build this relationship with him, was able to minister to him and help him in those ways. And he went back to Ukraine, and it wasn't long after he was there, probably 2 years, something like that. 2 years after he was there, he sends me an email. Of course, I kept in touch with him after he went back. And so in 2010, he goes back in 2007. So 2010, so 3 years later, he comes back here to study abroad and attend university here. And now is a green card holder and lives here in Manhattan and has his own CPA business and so on and so forth. And he asked me to help him come back here. And I had an opportunity to help make that dream come true for somebody. And it blesses me so much to know that I played a small part in that. And look at how he's taking advantage of the opportunities. We can't help who shows up at our doorstep, but we should never refuse a desire to want to help them overcome and be able to establish themselves and be able to build a life for themselves. And I hope that this message encourages you today, because we can't help, again, some things that happen to us. The people who've come here from Ukraine or from these other countries who have suffered so much from being in these war-torn countries and things, we can sit back and fuss and make it a political issue. But again, what if it was your family? How would you want people to treat you and your family? And I think that's what we should think about. And I think ultimately we should remember what Jesus said. Remember, he said, if you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And those verses I read to you, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. And Jesus is saying that if we did it to them, if we do it to them, we're actually doing it to him. And so we should never forget that. We can't change all the politics. We can't do all those things. We can vote. We can do our duties and so on and so forth. But people are people, and we should never lose sight of that. Thank you for tuning in today. This is On Beat. I'm Todd Daniels. Thank you again for watching. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, but hopefully I can get back on track of getting these up here on a more regular basis. And I hope these are meaningful to you. Again, I just want to use this as an opportunity to encourage. Not here to point fingers or put people down, those kinds of things, but to just try and encourage one another, because we all benefit from encouragement. Blessings on your day.